This is Bob Martin with rcsub.com and the Nautilus Dry Docks, and I wanted to take a moment today to show you my latest project. This is another 1/69th scale Disney Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This model is set up as a dynamic diver. It has no ballast tank inside. The owner wanted to have something that was very simple, easy to operate, and so what we did is we dispensed with the ballast system for simplicity's sake, but what that actually did was it freed up the center section for a full salon interior, which is pretty cool for an RC model. So I'm going to take a few moments. We'll show you how this thing operates underneath the water and how I put it together. Alright, let's get started. This is basically all of the components of the submarine. If we start at the right here, we're looking at the watertight cylinders. This is basically a modified version of the standard cylinder that I usually put in this model. And basically all I did was chop out the center section, which is the ballast section of the submarine, leaving the battery compartment and the electronics compartment. If we look over here, I've got the rear removable tail assembly, the salon section, removable salon section with the salon settee couches, the teardrop couches, the specimen table, of course the oriental rug in there as well. We've got our removable ram, which is basically the retaining pin for the model that holds the upper and lower hulls together. The upper hull itself, and we have the lower hull. Got some lead ballast in here. In these sections, it fits underneath the salon area, and this is really the business end of the submarine. And we'll start with our description here because a lot of people have questions about how to implement pitch control on the Nautilus. If you take a look at this upper hull section here, you can see that it was designed by Harper Goff to have functional dive planes here at the rear, here at the front, and then they have some small trim planes here. Now I've built quite a few Nautilus models in my day, and I can tell you with certainty that these dive planes have very little effect on the Nautilus and do not serve very well to offer pitch control. They are too close to the center of the model and they're just too small. So what that means is people are forced to implement a different way of controlling the pitch of the model. And in the past I've done a set of auxiliary dive planes behind the propeller, and that works exceptionally well, but it's not very scale in appearance. And so what I've taken to doing is implementing a gimbaled propeller. And basically what that does is it directs the thrust of the model up or down and gives instantaneous control over pitch. So if we take a look at this, it's very, very simple. I've got a little arm here, an actuator that tilts the propeller up and down through its arc. And that basically just runs straight from the inside here, underneath, connects to the arm, and tilts the propeller up and down. It runs through this piece of clear silicone tubing, which allows some flex, because our drive shaft here, of course, is connected to the watertight cylinder. So you can see as everything moves, we still have a flexible connection to the watertight cylinder. And the reason I went with silicone tubing is it is pretty tight in there. If I were to go with something more like a proper universal joint like this, just because of the size, you can see there's not a lot of room. It would not offer very much flexibility for pitch. So that's the tilting propeller arrangement. Like I said, very, very simple. Just a wheel collar with a shaft through that runs to either side, your actuator arm. Rudder control basically runs through this prop shaft, or prop guard support that I fabricated, and runs right through the inside of it. You can see everything's really floppy there right now because I don't have the upper section in place, but I wanted to make sure that I had full access to the interior to service this flexible connection if it does wear out or slip over time. And this works very, very well. So what we'll do from here is we'll put everything together. I'll show you how it all works, how I tackled some of these problems, and you can see what the finished product looks like. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by getting the rear upper fin section of the model put into place. Basically, like I said, this is it's very simple. The rudder fits into its respective slot. Tail section snaps down. And I've got two standard Phillips head retaining screws that basically thread through the blocks inside. And once they've been tightened down, it holds the rear section in place. And that part is done, ready to go. Just taking a quick look at the aft section of the model here, you can actually see, perhaps faintly, the clear plastic rudder extension. Now this is something that I do on all my RC models of the Nautilus. Now the Nautilus has a really good response to her rudder, of course, with it being right behind the propeller. All of that thrust gets directed right against it, and it works fairly well. But I found that simply running a razor saw through the back of the the rudder, and putting in this clear plastic sheet increases the turning performance of the model by basically 100%. So you go from, say, an 8-foot turning radius to something more like 4 to 5 feet, which is just amazing, and it gives extremely good response and drivability for the model. And this is completely removable for display. You simply pull it out, it's friction fit, and now you've got something that's a little bit more suited for static display. So from here we are going to drop in our aft electronics compartment. This is basically the engine room of the Nautilus. It contains the main drive, motor, your speed controller, 3 servos, only 2 of which are actually used, so there is actually a spare one for some extra functions if the owner decides to utilize them, and the receiver. So basically, to install this, you can see I've got just some straight rods that come out the back, and they slip into a pair of wheel collars. I'm just going to put the arms into their respective linkages, slide it back until it locks into place. Now the trick to this, of course, is to make sure that you get your drive shaft into the dog bone connector there as well. So once that's all done, what we want to do, and I'll slide this forward here so you can see a little bit better, is adjust our propeller angle and our rudder so that they're dead center. And I'm just going to take my little Allen wrench, tighten down my screws nice and snug. The rear section is now in place. Now we're going to move to the forward battery compartment. And this is running a pair of lithium-ion batteries. tremendous runtime on here. This is definitely overkill for this model. I probably got too many batteries in that, and if I were to take one out, it would float a little bit better with the need for less foam. However, this is the way I decided to set it up, and it gives tremendous runtime, so I'm certain that's not going to be a big problem with the owner. Just a pin that slips in the front. I'll make sure and get my light lead out. So once the front pin is in place, the bottom just drops down into place. So now you can see I've got a connector here that connects the battery compartment to the electronics compartment. We're just going to slip this together, and we're going to tuck this neatly into the channel that runs between my ballast weights there. Now you can also see this. This is the power lead for the lighting system, and this gets power with the main power switch here as well, so you can actually tell when the Nautilus is powered on. Alright, now that I have the front and rear sections in place, what I want to do is take my receiver antenna. This runs out of the back of our engine compartment there, and I'm going to thread this through a series of holes that I've put in the bulkheads that run along the outside of the model. And the idea behind this is to stretch out the antenna as long as possible so that we get the best possible reception. And this feeds around the front, and there's a little hook here. You just hook that over. And once I get to the back, I'm just going to drop that in, tuck it in neatly underneath the motor compartment. So our antenna wire strung along the outside of the hull. Now what I'm going to do is drop in my salon section. And there is a front and a back to this to make sure. I've got a big arrow carved in to show you which way is forward. And this drops in. Just going to make sure that I haven't pinned any of my wires. Tuck them in underneath the salon section so everything fits. Drop in these two brass retaining screws. And these are just tightened down just snugly. There's no need to tighten these down anymore because really they're just to stop the salon section from lifting and allowing the two compartments to rattle loose. There we go. You can see everything is very snug. Now what we're going to do is move on to the upper hull and get that in place. So here's the upper hull section. We have a power lead that comes out, and that runs the LED lighting. You can see that the salon windows are open on both sides, and that gives, of course, a view of the salon area. All of the hatches are fully functional on the front and back. So what we're going to do, actually I'll show you this here first. This is all of the flotation foam that I have inside the upper hull, and it actually takes quite a bit because there's no ballast tank to provide positive buoyancy. It takes a lot of foam. Now, as you can see, if you were to look through that window, you can see the foam. It's not entirely attractive, but the way I have this set up is actually this whole center section is secured down with Velcro. So what we'll do now is just going to set the hull in place here. Take the connectors, pop those together. I'm going to tuck the lighting wires in neatly in this compartment in the front. And now you set the back in place. There is a little brass retaining pin that is back there. So what I'm going to do before I close it up, the switch is right here in the front, which is nice easy access. I'm just going to flip it on, pinch the nose down tight, give the ram a little twist, and there we go. The Nautilus is now operational, fully functional, and ready for the water. You can see I've got some green attack lighting in there, and if you can tell, I'm going to block that light there, there's a little bit of purple in there. That's actually an ultraviolet LED. And what I did inside is the depth tube and the gauge faces have a little bit of glow-in-the-dark paint. So after a few moments, the ultraviolet LED will charge that up, and once you turn the lights off, it'll glow on its own. But in the meantime, the gauge faces and the depth tube are going to glow with a nice bright green light. There we are, 1/69th scale Disney version Nautilus from 20,000 leagues under the sea, all buttoned up and ready for the water.